In September 2023, Microsoft has released a new research paper called Autogen. It is an AI autonomous multi-agent conversational framework. In my last video, we have gone through the examples from the GitHub examples on Google Colab. It demonstrated the capabilities of what Autogen can do. Today we're going to set it up locally on Windows, and we are going to use VS Code, Python, and Docker. If you don't have any programming coding experience, don't worry, because this video is just for you. To follow along, you will need VS Code for Windows, Docker for Windows, and Python. If you haven't set up already, go to Visual Studio website and download for Windows and install the Visual Studio Code for Windows. Next, go to the Python website, and the version we're using in this lab is 3.11.6. So click on this download for 64-bit Windows installer. Last, the Autogen website says, for the best user experience and seamless code execution, we highly recommend using Docker with Autogen. So we'll go to the Docker website, and you're gonna click on download for Windows and install on your desktop. I already have my VS Code installed, so let's start with Python. I'm gonna go customize installation. Make sure I'm installing for all users, but make sure you take this environment variable need to be added to system path. Click on install. The Python has successfully completed installation. Next, let's install Docker. Double click on that. Here comes the Docker installer. Make sure WSL Windows Subsystem Linux 2 are ticked here. Go OK. The installation for Docker has completed. Now let's make sure it actually runs. First, you're going to accept the agreement. I'm using the recommended settings, just go finish. And here you go. Welcome to Docker Desktop. You can continue without signing in, and we're just gonna skip this. So what you need to make sure before we run the Autogen is come in here and check the Docker, make sure it is actually running. So right now it shows starting. Let's give it a minute. Okay, now shows the Docker's desktop is running. Looks like we are running the Docker. And when you come to images, all these should have nothing in it. Okay, so let's close that, and it is still running in the background. Now we have set up the VS Code, Python, and the Docker desktop. Let's configure them in the VS Code. First, you're gonna go to extension, search Python, published by Microsoft. So this is the first extension we're gonna install. I'm already installed it, so you're gonna click on install here. Next, we're gonna install another one called the Docker, also published by Microsoft. So we're gonna install this as well. Again, I have installed this previously. Last, since we're using Docker, so WSL Windows Subsystem for Linux is something nice to have in the VS Code. So make sure you install that as well. If we have a look at our installed program, you can see what we have just installed. There's a Docker, there's Python, and this Windows Subsystem for Linux. We did not install that, so it's part of installation by Docker. If for some reason your Docker is not working and you don't have this, you can simply go to the PowerShell and just run this command, and that will install everything you need for the Windows Subsystem for Linux. When you use VS Code for the very first time, you will probably have nothing here under the open folder. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna open the folder that will be our work directory. So we'll go to the folder, and you can just create a new one. Let's call it, I'm gonna call it Autogen. And we're gonna select that, go select folder. Okay, so we have an empty folder selected under here, there's nothing here. Next, we are going to create a virtual environment to run our code. So go to terminal, and let's bring up our terminal. Now, why do we need a virtual environment? Well, number one, it's a general practice, a good practice to run all your code in a container so it won't be conflicting with your system. And number two is highly recommended by Autogen because you are running autonomous agents on your computer and they execute codes. You don't know what they're gonna do just in case. So it's definitely a wise thing to do to run your code in a container with Docker. To create a new virtual environment, you're gonna run python-m venv and a name for your virtual environment. You can call it anything, and I'm just calling it autogen-ve. Let's hit enter. It's done. And you can see on the left, under the Autogen folder, now we have another subfolder called Autogen-ve, which represents our virtual environment. All these are created by default. And you can see there's a scripts folder where there's activate file, and we're going to activate our virtual environment. So you can navigate to this folder, run the activate PowerShell. Here we go. So now you know you are in the virtual environment by telling this name of your virtual environment is highlighted in green in each line of your command prompt. So now we can install the required package for our demo. So we're going to install Autogen and Docker. Everything will be contained within this virtual environment, and it should not conflict with other files on your system. So now the required libraries have been installed to our virtual environment. We are almost ready for our code. Let's check the version of Python we have here. Okay. First, we want to create a new Python file for our Autogen code. So click on New File, click on Python, and let's save it before we put anything in. I have created my first file, and I called it firstapp.py and saved it under the same folder in the scripts. You can save it anywhere under this virtual environment. So let's start with import Autogen. The first step is to load the model. We are using a variable, we call it config list. You can call it anything you want. The function we're using is called config list underscore from JSON. That means the models we are loading from is defined in this file, which is in JSON format. Now, this file is an environment variable. You can have all the models you need. And this filter dict function will further filter out the models you want to use within this app. This is an example of what a config list should look like. In here, you can have your model name and API key. And it does not need to be an OpenAI model. You can have any model you want, as long as they can be defined here and they can be called out from the app. And you will save them as in this file, OAI config list. I already have my file made up, so I'm just gonna copy that to the Autogen folder. So it's sitting outside the virtual environment, which means under my work folder, this environment variable can be shared among different virtual environments. And in my list, it's just two models, very simple. I could have more models here, but in here, just two models, which means this filter function here is redundant, right? I have two models and I'm having them both listed here. Next, let's pass in the LLM config. There's a couple of parameters here. The timeout is quite important because as a multi-agent framework, you expect multiple agents, the AI bots, to work with each other. So there will be many different rounds of communications. So you need to adjust the timeout in case it times out. Seed means cache. So what does that mean? When Autogen app runs, if it already had answers in the cache, it will always go for the cache first. And then it will go through the external API calls to get answers for you. So let's say I already run this app once, and there will be actually a folder created under our virtual environment folder called 42, because that's where all the cached files data are. And if I don't want the app to go through the cache when I run it second time, I can just change to this any number I want, 48. then it will ignore the cache and just go through the API calls with our external models. Let's leave it at default 42. Config list. This is the config list we configured before. You can call it anything you want as long as this is being passed back to the actual config underscore list variable. Lastly, the temperature is 0 because we want a precise answer without much hallucination or no imagination at all. We want the fact. Now we have the foundation ready. The Autogen app always begins with construction agents. By default, there are 2 AI agents, one for the assistant and another for the user. So in here, this is just standard code I copied from the demo previously from Microsoft GitHub. So first we are defining a assistant agent using autogen.assistant agent, and we just call it assistant. Notice here there's no system message. That means it's just going to be a default. And the most default system message for OpenAI models are just "you are helpful AI assistant." Second, we're creating a user proxy agent, and we just call it user proxy. And there's a bit more here. Terminate means this user agent will be passing the instruction from human. The goal, set the goal for the assistant. They're working with each other, and until it reaches a final solution, the user proxy will not consult human for input. So here says, reply terminate if the task has been solved at a full satisfaction. And this code execution config means if there's a code or other file being created, there will be a folder here called web. Again, you can call it anything you want, and that will be a repository for all the code it generated. So we are actually now ready to execute the task. You always start with giving the user proxy agent a instruction and evoke the initiate underscore chat function. And in between this triple double quotes is the message you want to pass on. So this is our goal, to build a classic Space Invader game. Before we can run the code, let's tweak this a little bit. First of all, this environment variable, because referred as this, so we need to get rid of this file extension here, otherwise it won't be recognized. I'll get rid of that. So we are now good with the APIs. Next, let's add a system message here. Let's call it you are the world's best programmer. Well, assess the requirement and think step by step. Continue to improve the code until it meets the requirement. Okay, and in our input mode, we'll change to always, so we can prompt the model to build a game that meets our requirement. And here's the message, the actual task: build a classic Space Invader game in Python. Click run. The first thing you can see is the user proxy is passing humans our task to the assistant. Build a classic Space Invader game in Python. A few minutes later, we have got the result back, and it's asking me, the real human, to give feedback because we have set it to always. So this is the first result. Let's see what it did. After the user proxy agent has passed the task to the assistant agent, assistant replied to the user proxy say, hey, to build a classic Space Invader game in Python involves several steps. So it broke down the business requirement into steps because we've asked to think through it step by step. For example, number 1, you're going to set up the game window. Number 2, you're going to create the player. Number 3, create the invader. So it has understood the requirement fully, and there is collision detections and a Python. The code seems like in different pieces. I probably wanted to output the whole code in one block to run it easily. This is a very basic version of the Space Invaders, and there's a lot more you can add. And now it's asking us for the feedback. Okay, so let's see whether under this work folder, this code has been saved, because in the past when I tested it, a lot of time it says as AI agent, I do not have access to your file system. So let's minimize this. So this is the work directory. Oh, we've got actual code here. Let's open that. So let's see whether this one will run. To run the actual Python code, I'm gonna switch to command prompt. And we will go to the folder where the web folder is. This is Autogen. Now let's go to the web. And you can see this file just got created a couple of minutes back. So let's do Python. And we'll do Space Invader.py. Let's see what happens. No file, game over, found in the working directory. So it actually has a sound. We don't need that complicated, do we? Now let's go back to the feedback. And we'll say, I received an error when running the code. I'll paste error. It didn't paste error. Okay. We do not need the sound effect for the game. Keep it simple. Now the user proxy is passing my feedback to the assistant agent. And let's see what comes back with. So after I said, keep it simple, there's no sound effect needed, it got back to me with some very interesting answers. So here I say, we do not need the sound effect for the game, keep it simple. And the assistant replies to user proxy straight away, says, the code I provide does not include any sound effect. The error you are seeing might be from different part of the code, your code. No, it's not my code, it's your code. So if we look at the code in the Space Invader, you can clearly see there's a game over sound and calling this MP, or there's even MP3. All these gonna error out, all these external referencing with images and sound. So I type it back. It says it's a game over wave. And so I'm pretty sure your code is referencing that. The reply is, I apologize for the confusion, but the code provided in the previous does not reference any sound file, including game over. The error you are encountering might be from a different part. Okay, it's very, very strict on his own belief. If we check this new code again, do we see any? Actually, it doesn't. So let me close this. Okay, so we have this on the video recorded as a proof. Let's close that and open this code again, because now he's updated. He, she, who, they. Updated. Still has that. Let's try copy paste this. Let's try copy paste this bit and into our code. Copy that. And we'll paste here. Now this one doesn't look like there's any WAV files or PNGs. Okay, so let's save it. Run our code again. Here we go. This time actually it worked. Now we just need to make it look a bit better. So let's say your new code looks good. Please resize the enemy, typo is okay, to small squares. A response back says, sure, you can easily adjust the size of the invaders by changing the dimension of the method of invader class. It didn't give me the code in the blocks, so I've messaged back again, says please provide the full code in the block. So here's the final code. Let's copy that and paste to our code. I'm not sure whether this has been updated, so let's just ignore that. I'll delete them all and copy paste, save. Now come back here to run our code again. Here we go. Is it smaller this time? Where did it go? It didn't run. The game didn't run this time. Please check the code again. So that was my bad. I just copy and paste the same code again, saved it, and let's run it. It actually runs. So as you can see, the enemy is smaller. We probably wanted to, oh, it's a bit hard. Let's add more enemies every couple of seconds. So let's say the game looks good. Can we add new row of enemies every 5 seconds? We got our final code back, and I also asked to do a quick summary of what this game do. Listed the features. Now, copy the code, update it, and let's run it, see what it looks like. Run the game, and then we're playing. Now the last feature we asked to include is new enemy every 5 seconds. Looks like that's working. So that's good. In this tutorial, we have learned how to build a very basic app with Autogen using VSCode and Docker. It is a very basic example using just 2 agents. So in the next video, we'll explore the true potential of Autogen with multiple agents, a team of AI robots that are working for you towards solving a complex task. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.